we don't want them to become climate scientists. We just want them to authentically care, even say, this is something I'm worried about as an individual.
Hello and welcome to Green Queens,
the perfect podcast for imperfect environmentalists.
I thought you were going to say the perfect podcast for Imogen and Abby then.
Also that true.
Yeah. We are your hosts. I'm Abby.
And I'm Imogen.
And today we have a very special guest on. Do you want to tell us a little bit about our guest, Imogen?
Yes. Oh my goodness me. So we have just finished the conversation with Hattie Park, who is Head of Sustainability at Wimbledon. And yes, that is Wimbledon, the championships, the amazing mecca of tennis.
Yes, the iconic, have been watching since I was 3 years old, eating strawberries. And I was going to say drinking Pimm's, but the Pimm's started approx age 15, 16 for me.
Pretend Pimm's.
Yeah.
And I think I want to say off the bat here that, or should I say off the racket, be more relevant. When I thought like, oh, okay, we're going to have Wimbledon on the podcast, is this a little bit greenwashy?
Yeah.
And I want to put the listeners' minds to rest about how this is absolutely not greenwashy. So Wimbledon are part of the UN Sport for Climate Action Framework. And it is all about using their phenomenal platform, of which they have 670 million viewers worldwide during the championship, to influence that change. They have tremendous partnerships. They have a huge operation. There are so many aspects that they can change from an environmental perspective and start to influence that change across their broader network, be it viewers, be it the supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. And I was totally blown away.
Yeah, I think also, I've been working for Wimbledon for a couple of years now, or working with them. And I have always been a huge fan, but I kind of expected the same. You expect to walk through the door and it to feel quite stuffy and for people to be quite judgmental. And like, I'm from Grimsby. I am not a member of a posh tennis club at all, but I have always been a huge tennis fan and particularly a huge Wimbledon fan. And for it to be such a welcoming place, people say like you should never meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed. I was a bit nervous to go in and be met with that and feel like, oh, I'm so disappointed. And it has been the complete opposite of that. It's the most welcoming place. The people that work there are from all different walks of life. For example, the head gardener at Wimbledon, what an amazing role, started as an apprentice and has been there years and has worked his way up and now he's the head gardener. And I think the conversation we've just had with Hattie is a really clear example of that. She's wonderful, she's friendly, she's welcoming, she's really modest. And everything that they're doing in terms of sustainability goals as well are done in that kind of way of being like, actually at the core, they mean really well. They really want things to work. It's a lot of trial and error. And they're also trying to like maintain this beast that is something which is so like steeped in English culture and English heritage, which I think is so special.
Oh, 100%. So I hope that everyone really gets that glimpse into this totally family feel organisation who is actually pioneering tremendous change. And you're so right. Hattie is one of the most modest people that we've ever come across.
I know.
And anything that is anything to do with sustainability at Wimbledon, she has spearheaded. So credit where credit's due. Should we meet Hattie?
Yay!
Yay!
So, Hattie Park, Head of Sustainability at Wimbledon, what a complete joy and honour it is to have you on Green Queens.
Oh, thank you. It's very nice to be here and chat to you both.
Oh, it's so nice to have you on. And it's so nice. I feel like this is the perfect Green Queens introduction to talk about sport and to talk about sustainability within sport, because I don't think there is a single listener that doesn't love a bit of Wimbledon and the Wimbledon Whites and the iconic British Tennis Championship and everything that it stands for. Do you want to start a little bit about and tell us a little bit about your kind of origin story? How did you first get into sustainability?
Well, interestingly, I was digging this out at the weekend, Abby, because as it happens, it appears that I was quite interested in sustainability a really long time ago when I did my undergraduate degree. I dug out my old dissertation and I barely dare say this out loud, but 1991, and it was about environmentalism. And I was writing about how I was a geographer, and how geography was the perfect academic discipline to capitalize on this growing interest in the environment. And it was before climate change was a thing, but it was definitely when protecting the environment was a thing. And so, it is something that has been on my radar, for a very, very long time. And I think growing up, my mother was always very reuse. She'd grown up with, in the war and with rationing. And so it's something that has always, I suppose, been part of me, and a love of landscapes as well, time spent up in Yorkshire in the Dales. So it's something that's always been sort of in me to a certain point. I think I went off piste a little bit in my 20s and early 30s, just mucking about. But then in my mid 30s, I did a master's at Imperial College called Environmental Technology, and kind of did a career switch into corporate sustainability.
That's absolutely incredible. And when you said, I went a bit off piece, I thought you were going to say worked in oil and gas or something.
No,
I was waiting for it.
Never that. But, didn't really know where I was going or what I was doing. I had a really nice time, playing around in London in my 20s. But it was really in my 30s that I was like, well, there was, I think Al Gore Inconvenient Truth was going around. I was working in a small startup brand consultancy, and I was trying to get us onto a renewable tariff. I was trying, the local authority wouldn't take our recycling. I felt we were wasting a lot. So at that point, it just felt to me that this was something that I was interested in, and was there a way to work in that field?
So when you came to Wimbledon, were you... How clued up on the sustainability agenda were they, or were you having to do a huge amount of legwork there?
Well, I think it was a question of really good timing arriving at Wimbledon. I think they knew that this was something that was important, and knew that they were very open to sort of creating a framework and taking more action. I arrived... I suppose I kind of engineered my way in. I'd been working in sustainability for quite a while, and I'd been laying, I suppose, the foundations for my own knowledge and making contacts in sport as well. So I was at the BBC. We'd held a conference for BASIS, which is the British Association for Sustainable Sport. So I was building contacts, and I kind of got to hear that Wimbledon were looking to see what more they could do. So I think they were very open to it, and just needed someone. By that time I had sort of 9 years experience as well. The climate marches, the youth climate marches were taking place. So it just felt like a combination of sort of laying the groundwork myself and good timing as well to come into Wimbledon. And they knew that they were already buying renewable electricity. It wasn't that nothing was happening. It was just that it was maybe a little bit sort of scattered in different parts of the organisation. And I think they needed somebody to bring it all together. And I tried to have a go at that.
That's probably something that a lot of places and organisations have seen in the last probably decade, is that all of a sudden they've had to kind of create these roles that weren't a thing because it wasn't really necessary 20, 30 years ago to have a head of sustainability, or so it may seem. And so it's people that I guess, like you, have been going into these places that have such a long history and have been around for so long, and you're kind of now having to retrospectively plan for the future. What's that been like? How long have you been at Wimbledon now?
About 6.5 years.
And what have those 6.5 years been like? Has it been a lot of like legwork, a lot of conversations, or have you been able to hit the ground running, do you think, with stuff?
I think I've been really lucky and actually been able to hit the ground running. I think it was very different in my earlier years at the BBC, where, and that's not to say that the BBC wasn't aware of the responsibility it has, but it was harder and it was a bigger organisation. It took quite a long time to get, in front of the Director General there. Arriving at Wimbledon, I was having a meeting with the Chief Executive within the first couple of weeks. I think at Wimbledon, they've been really receptive to it. I think it's part of our kind of heritage and our values, if that doesn't sound too
Yeah.
corny, but we present tennis in an English garden, we play on a living surface. It's something that I'm just going to turn off my Outlook because it's beeping at me. Sorry. Really annoying. Hopefully we won't get any more beeps. It has not been an uphill struggle at all. It's been actually, it's been genuinely really enjoyable.
Yeah.
So walk us through some of those steps then, because I imagine there was some reasonably low-hanging fruit, perhaps pun intended, when it comes to strawberries there, and some other bigger, really, really challenging tasks as well. What are some of the things that you've done?
Well, I suppose the first thing is kind of set, well, what do we want to aim to achieve? And rather than saying we want to reduce our impact on the environment, I think the first thing we wanted to sort of put a stake in the ground was to say, ultimately, we want to try and have a positive impact on the environment, to try and give back more than we take. And when you see the impact that, changing climate is having on sport, it seems only right that that's what we're aiming for. But then we focus on 4 kind of interconnected areas that all are sort of relevant to us as an organisation. And I would say relevant to anyone really who's wanting to look at what they can do to protect the environment. And one is around emissions. The other is around resource efficiency, nature and biodiversity. And then the final one is around using our influence to inspire wider action. And so, as you say, Imogen, there's a real range of big things and little things. And that's the other sort of learning that I was taking from this was you have to do everything. You've got to look after the big stuff, but you also need to do these sort of maybe smaller impact in the big scheme of things, but visibly very powerful, symbols. So, the big stuff is around decarbonising our operations. So that will be, I don't know if we'll come on to that in a bit more detail later, but, eliminating use of fossil fuels from our operations. But then thinking about, resource efficiency. There was a big drive on plastic when I arrived. So, we'd gone as far as eliminating plastic straws, but we still had a lot of single-use plastic bottles. That, again, really, really visible. So introducing reusable cups for all of our drinks, working with Evian to get reusable bottles for the players. And now Evian's introduced a reusable refill for spectators as well, so you can do refills of Evian water, which is the first place that that's happening, which is great. And then I think in the context, I think I'm probably I don't know if I'm going in a different direction now, but in the context of nature, I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed so much about working here, and I think is one of the most powerful things that we can do, is really showcase, the improvements that you can make to nature and get people to really enjoy that English garden experience when they come and visit the championships, and getting to work with our gardening team who are just brilliant and inspiring has been really wonderful. And it's all about creating this sort of mosaic of different sorts of habitats around the grounds. And we don't just have the main grounds at Wimbledon on Church Road. We have a community tennis centre in Rains Park, which is nearby. Incredible biodiversity improvements going on there as well. Qualifying happens at Roehampton. We have the Parkland site across the way. So this kind of the really integrating nature into the Wimbledon experience is something I think that's kind of quite unique and special, and where we can really make an impact as well.
I think there's so much incredible stuff. Obviously, I've been on site the last couple of years working with you, Hattie, looking at it all and seeing some of the things as they progress. And it has been wonderful to see, particularly because there are a lot of places a lot of organisations that I've worked with, a lot of people I've worked with, and a lot of the narrative or a lot of the sort of commitments that people are making. It's a lot around like the everyday person. What can we try and don't get me wrong, sport has a huge responsibility when it comes to inspiring. It's the fans, and that's another conversation that no doubt we'll get onto. But it's actually we can't put everything on the fans that are coming and say, oh, why don't you take public transport? Why don't you try not to, use single-use plastic? I think what Wimbledon are doing is actually a lot of the stuff that isn't particularly sexy, decarbonising Wimbledon. Like that doesn't sell very much, does it? But actually that's the stuff that is going to have the longevity, and you're going to see a real difference there with, installing solar panels, with, making sure that the kitchens are not running off gas. That's the stuff that I think actually is, you guys are really leading by example, because you're doing that and you're also trying to reduce the single-use plastic, and you're trying to make it so that people have a lovely experience. But I think that mix of actually the unsexy stuff that's going on behind the scenes that probably very few people will know about or will even see when they're there, but the stuff that really matters. And then also the quick wins of mind the plant, of the strawberries and vegan cream and those sorts of things as well. That is where I think I am constantly blown away and totally take my hat off to you and what you have managed to do, because it's no mean feat doing everything, and it feels like you have done a little bit of everything.
Well, the stuff behind the scenes it really does matter, and you're right, nobody sees that their lunch has been cooked on an electric induction rather than a gas burner, but we're quietly getting on with that behind the scenes. So I think one of our technicians there are 42 kitchen spaces, Wimbledon kitchen spaces with cooking in them, and 30 of them are now electrified. And so, we're putting in some investment behind the scenes. And some solar on the roofs. Actually, above me, there's solar on the roof right above me here. We'll never generate on site as much as we need, so we'll always have to be buying renewable electricity. But where we've, in newer buildings, we've been putting solar on, and actually we've just done a retrofit of an existing building. So the player pavilion at Orangi, where the practice courts are, we've put some solar thermal tubes on there. Working together with Barclays, who are helping us do that. But that preheats the water that goes through the electric boilers. So we've taken out the gas cooking, the gas boilers. We've got electric boilers supported with solar, and so that building is now entirely fossil fuel free, which is great. But that doesn't make any difference to your day out at Wimbledon, but the fact is it's something that's important to us and we're doing it anyway. But when you are at Wimbledon, you can choose your plant-based cream if you want to. You can see that you can enjoy the nature around the grounds. You can refill your bottle. You can see the carbon weighting of the food that we serve as well. So that combination of behind the scenes and visibility is really important.
Just a really quick one. What was that conversation like with Evian, the plastic bottle company, when you first went to them and said, we would quite like to change your entire business model in order to keep sponsoring Wimbledon?
Well, I don't think Evian would call themselves a plastic bottle company. No. They are about the water, and there's a lot of really, their passion comes through in terms of the purity of the water and the area that the water comes from. I think what was the conversation like? I think initially it was just they could see, refill as something that aspirationally feels like the right thing to do, but logistically very, very hard. And so the initial response is around producing bottles from recycled plastic. So the first in 2019, I think the first bottle produced from recycled plastic was Evian bottles. So, they've always been moving forward. But the refill was definitely really hard logistically. But, they were, I think they could see that there was criticism that was coming to us because of single-use plastic. And despite the fact that the bottles were recycled plastic, it didn't really cut it. And, they've been working with us for 11 years now, or longer even. I've probably got that fact wrong, but they've been our official water for really a long time. And so the relationship really matters. And so they were willing to put the extra effort in. So, there's a sterile production facility behind the scenes. They had specialists checking the integrity of the water from the refills. They really invested a lot of time and money in actually making sure that this worked. But it had great results. It was really, really visible. You see these incredible athletes on court refilling, or with the refillable bottles. When they extended it to the spectator scheme as well, a lot of people came to see, well, how have Wimbledon and Evian done that together? And it is really nice that we have done it together. So I've got, really nothing but praise for the Evian team, because they made it happen.
Well,
and it's really nice.
You made them.
With us. Exactly, with us. Cool. I mean, I think that is the thing, that a lot of the things you can't do it on your own. You do need to do things together, and Evian and us, we made something really quite good happen. The challenge now is scaling it up, out of our walls, and it's more manageable here because we've got the production facility and it's contained. But their global team are looking at how it can be scaled up.
Well, I think the thing that is so fascinating, reflecting on some of those comments, is that there are many people out there who say, "Oh, I recycled my plastic bottle," or "I didn't use a plastic bottle." What difference is that going to make? But I think what you've described there is that these tangible touch points of sustainability that bring it front and center all the time, that the strawberries are locally produced, or that you're not using a plastic bottle, and that Evian have changed their supply chain, etc., etc. It solidifies the value of the bigger things, for example, decarbonising your buildings or retrofitting your buildings. But the other thing that I think is so fascinating in that as well is that because Wimbledon has a sustainability agenda and a target to be net zero by 2030, it puts a lot of pressure on your supply chain, and it forces them to step up. And I suppose that's part of the influence of sport. There's a lot of eyeballs and there's a lot of lucrative partnerships. And I wonder if you could describe some of the other challenges in the supply chain, perhaps.
Yeah, well, firstly, we've got, and just to make it more complicated, we've got 2 net zero targets. So the initial target for 2030 is for our own operations. So that for us would mean that we are powered operating to optimal efficiency, powered entirely by renewable electricity. So that for us is about eliminating fossil fuels, gas and fuel from our operations. We have a longer term goal to be net zero for everything else, i.e. supply chain, by 2040. And that comes as part of we're a signatory to something called the UN Sport for Climate Action Framework. And I sort of, clarifying that, I've slightly forgotten your question, but it's about the pressure we can bring to bear on our supply chain. It's partly pressure that we can put on the supply chain, but it has to be collaborating and doing things together. So I would say, and it's really important as well that we have that wider net zero target as well. Our operational net zero target is important, but I always try and describe that in the context of, and longer term, we also need to decarbonise our supply chain. And again, that's going to be really challenging. I think even quantifying the impacts of the supply chain is really, really hard. And as a sustainability person, I'm quite often really, the data that I have, I've only got kind of medium confidence in the data that I've got. And I think lots of people who do similar jobs to me feel like that as well. But it also, it's something that, in the way that it's been really enjoyable working with Evian on the refill, I think that it's going to be an enjoyable part of the journey, partnering with the suppliers in terms of how we can, and learning as well, how we can, drive down the emissions further along in the supply chain. Our food and drink partner are really doing a lot in terms of, sourcing. We really pride ourselves on seasonal, local sourcing, but also thinking about what food we're serving. And so it's, from my point of view, it's an interesting educational exercise. And, I think where we can really, hopefully, make more change as well. I think it's a bit wrong there, but
yeah. And look, it's always going to be a bumpy ride. I think, particularly when you are pioneering something, like you've kind of been the leaders, really, particularly in the tennis world. But I think largely in the global sporting calendar, particularly British sporting calendar, which is probably quite surprising, because I think it's a championship that is based off of such tradition and heritage, and very little, I think, has changed about that. You know, people will get dressed up and it's got this gorgeous British legacy to it. And yet actually there have been loads of things, and it may be that people are completely unaware of that you've tried over the years and not been afraid to kind of try and then fail at. Like, are there some things that have gone spectacularly wrong, or just that you've gone, okay, probably won't do that again?
Well, I don't know about going spectacularly wrong, but I think a really important point to make is definitely to talk about where you are and where you're not. I think, you know, just I'm one of the first always to say that we have got an awful lot more to do. I can go out there and saying we're doing this, 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 and this. There is still so much more to do. And you're right that some things don't work, and that we're sort of further behind on the journey than we would like to be. But I think talking about where we need to get to is one of the really important things that sports can do. I think sport can influence in ways that perhaps other sectors can't. I think if we are clear in saying sport is being impacted, we're being impacted, we know we're part of those impacts, but also the solutions are out there. And these are the steps that we're taking here at Wimbledon to try and, you know, limit our impacts, ultimately have a positive impact. Yes, we haven't done this bit yet, but this is the bit that we have done, and we've shown that it can work. I think we'll kind of, it's important that we talk about it. And you're very kind to say that Wimbledon was leading. I think also you need to, you know, the Olympic Games have always been really trailblazing. I think the team, you know, with the London 2012 Olympics, I think they worked really, really hard. And again, in Paris, there was an amazing team on the Olympics there who were doing really sort of interesting, groundbreaking things. And the challenge probably for sport is to bring it to the fore when, and I find this sometimes at Wimbledon, you know, this is about the tennis. The tennis is the main event. So how do we authentically talk about the, you know, the environment, our environment, be an environment positive champion? How can we get that message out to people in a really clear, engaging, authentic way when actually they're here to watch the tennis? And so part of it, I feel, is around, we'll just do it anyway. So it's just part of that experience.
But I think that is so fascinating, because what you've described there is that the role of sport in the context of sustainability is to use its influence to set the direction of travel, and actually as an aspirational, cool and sexy sport, for then, exactly as you say, for that to just be part of the experience. But you also said, you know, this is about the tennis, and for the players, they have got to be getting themselves absolutely in the mindset on that global stage. There's also some players who are astronomically wealthy and have private jets or use private jets. Yeah. And that must be a really huge challenge of bringing them on the journey as well.
Yeah, there's a big sigh that I was giving there. And I just, you know, the private jets is really hard. And I don't think it means that these players who perhaps are travelling in private jets don't care, because I think, you know, everyone cares about this environment that we completely depend upon. I think with the players, and there are players who are really engaged, and we get good feedback from the players about the things that we're doing. We had some of them taking part in a really nice little video that we put together last year. Abby's in it as well.
Yeah.
As am I. I think, you know, we have, in a way, we have quite a sort of transitory relationship with our players, because they come, they compete, and they leave. So we do our best while they're here to engage them if we can, talk to them about what we're doing. And then I think it's for us probably to build stronger relationships through the tours, through the WTA and ATP tours, to kind of, when the players are here, you know, can we perhaps get them engaged and doing something while they're here on the grounds? But, you know, I think they care. they're quite conscious of their impacts and their, while they are doing their job, traveling around the planet, they have quite a high carbon lifestyle.
Mm. It's so tricky because on the one hand, they have to get around. They don't have an abundance of time, and they are very, very high profile people, some of them, and need to protect themselves and their family. And at the same time, they're also playing on grass, outdoors, and are acutely aware of the environment. And it must be a conflict. I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah, no, nor do I. But I think, one of the things that we try and do at Wimbledon is really help the players connect with this natural environment. We have gorgeous and other bits of things that you don't see perhaps behind the scenes, the player practice areas. There's an absolutely gorgeous wildflower meadow around the back there. The gardeners are creating a new planted area. So we'll be showing the players what the carbon weightings are of the food that we're serving in the player restaurant. So can we just create the conditions for them to be engaged and involved and care a little bit more? And I think, we don't want them to become climate scientists. We just want them to authentically care, even say, this is something I'm worried about as an individual.
Yeah, I mean, they can be conscious individuals and be aware of the issues, but ultimately still have to get on with their day job. Imogen and I met with this sometimes. If Imogen particularly does a lot of travel for work, and there is no electric plane yet, so it's kind of we don't have much choice there, and they will feel exactly the same. But I think talking around, all of a sudden one year they turn up at Wimbledon and there is a refillable water bottle, or next thing they know, I think, is it right? Am I right in saying that this year the strawberries and cream will be served out of the Nopla, the seaweed?
We did that last year as well. So yes, so completely with seaweed lining. This year the spoon is going to be Nopla spoon as well.
So you'll be eating your strawberries and cream with seaweed.
Yes.
Interesting garnish.
Will have no impact on the flavour. The strawberries will still taste delicious.
But I think that there's two things that I think are so applicable to everybody's lives every single day. With the players, of course, that is an ongoing conversation of how they've reduced their impact outside of directly playing at Wimbledon. But what you've said there is that they are already conscious, and actually you can create the conditions that they can easily make the right choice, and that it's not this big hoo-ha. But also all of this sort of points to the behavioural shifts that you're encouraging. And when we spoke a few weeks ago, obviously there's the selection of the spoon that you can have that's made from seaweed, but even things like making the signage around recycling bins bigger, so people it's obvious and it's in people's minds, and it encourages that right decision very, very easily. And I wonder how many of those things have been very intentional versus trial and error.
Just colouring the tops of the bins was just a really simple thing to do as well. So everything needs to look beautiful here, and we have these beautiful wooden bin frames. And I couldn't believe how much time I was spending on the bins when I arrived at Wimbledon from my previous job. But less and less now. Actually, I think our natural behaviour is we're much more. We understand what's recyclable and what isn't, but we used to have, the tops of the bin frames were wooden. We've now got, green tops on the bins for recycling and purple for the general waste, and our colour palette lends itself very well to general waste and recycling. So I just think making it easy and clear. So on menus, there's always a plant-based or vegetarian option on every menu, and usually these are positioned at the top as well of the menus. So just making things visible.
That's a little gentle nudge. Oh, it's the first option. Oh, might you choose it? That's very smart, isn't it?
I wonder, Hattie, is there anything that you are super proud of that you've done since you've been there?
Oh gosh.
I think you're too modest.
I was just about to say that. You need somebody else to answer this for you. I can answer this for you. No, go on.
No, I mean, I think there are some really nice things that are happening just this year. Each year, what I'm proud of is each year there is more to talk about.
Yeah.
And I can now stand up on, actually, I like to stand on the roof literally above where I am sitting now. And that's a really brilliant sort of vantage point across the grounds to talk about the things that we're doing. You can see the living wall on the side of number 1 court. You can point to the Millennium Building, which has had the gas, literally turned the tap of the gas off in that building. You can see the solar panels. You can see across to Wimbledon Park and talk about our plans for the future and the incredible, the ecological due diligence that's gone on that project and this parkland setting that is coming. And each year there's something more, which is great. And so, the Nopla strawberries last year, this year, a really sweet thing that we're doing. And it's just small, but, tennis balls, we have these hard to deal with materials. So tennis balls, they are... Championships balls are sold with proceeds going to the Wimbledon Foundation during the championships, which is a really lovely thing. So you can queue up and buy balls that may have been used on centre court, and Iga Swiatek has belted that ball or something. And you can actually see the racket marks on the tennis balls. So that's really good. Year round, the tennis balls go into a recycling, because we're a tennis club year round. So, and we have the community tennis centre. Those balls go into a recycling scheme that the LTA has set up. But this year we've got about 1,200 balls. It's a small amount, but they are being made into acoustic panels that are going into a restaurant on site. And, it's just so, that's a small thing, but that's just one of our team who is doing that restaurant refurbishment has arranged for that to happen. And I just feel really proud that, across the organisation, there are people kind of, picking up things like that and making them happen. And that's a use for it, a small amount of balls, but it's a really nice tennis feature, and it's doing something with a kind of hard to deal with product.
And I guess that is the product of, slowly but surely, this is what we say all the time, just like trying to bring climate into the everyday conversation. Subconsciously, then you are making other people, this plant keeps getting in my way, you are sort of making other people think about it and care about it. And particularly, I think, being in an environment that's so beautiful like Wimbledon, and where everybody cares so much, that's where the pride element, and I guess you over the years, having seen that trickle down through various different departments and the impact that has had, that's something I can imagine that you feel a huge amount of pride about.
Yeah, and I think we all here are sort of really mindful of our heritage and, upholding that heritage and the beautiful natural environment, the area that they're planting around the practice courts. Our lead gardener was talking about, you want some flowers that are sort of flat because the butterflies love those, and then you need pointed stems for the bees, and so really thinking about how we plant things in order to sort of make maximum impact for pollinators as well. So the attention to detail and the thought, and the fact that we don't get it right all the time, but consideration from the environment is something that is more and more thought through and part of the decisions that we make. And so, I feel really pleased that that's happening.
The thing that's simultaneously extremely exciting about working in sustainability and also really challenging is that our impact on the planet is so pervasive. Everything that we do has an impact, which always means that there is going to be something on the to-do list of how we can improve. So I wonder, what is on your to-do list? And if you could be granted a couple of wishes, what are the things you say, do you know what, I would just love to wave that through and that it becomes really easy to deploy?
Oh, well, gosh, that is a really hard question. I think I'd love to, and this is a really boring answer as well. I can't say, I've got to think of something really interesting as well. But, I would love for the impact of our supply chain to be much clearer to us. So that we can really, drive that down. I think I would love for us to be able to go ahead with our plans on the Wimbledon Park project as well, because, as part of that, we're putting ground source heat pumps, which will enable us to, decarbonise, get rid of the gas infrastructure in number 1 court, and the incredible biodiversity gains that project will unlock. So I want that to happen. I suppose I just want everything to speed up.
Yeah.
I want also, I suppose, on the to-do list, but I suppose I don't quite know how I'm going to make it happen, is really grow this body of player advocates as well. I think that is the answer. I mean, nobody really wants to know what does the sustainability person at Wimbledon think, but they do want to know, well, what does Iga Świątek say? What does, Tsitsipas, or who was on our video, what does Carlos Alcaraz think about this? I don't know. And I think we want to really kind of create positive conditions within the environment so the players understand what we're doing and understand how they can be part of it, and then get out there and talk about it as well.
Well, for all of the professional tennis players listening, of which I'm sure they all are.
Yeah, we know that you listen, Green Queens.
They need to start shouting from the rooftops the wonderful stuff that's going on, because they want to be able to play outdoors on tennis. Oh, on tennis, I keep saying that, on grass. Yeah. It's vital for their joy of tennis. Yeah.
I think you mentioned earlier, like, Hattie, about how do we make people care? And that is difficult, isn't it? Because ultimately there will be a lot of people who just want to, come, eat strawberries and cream, drink Pimm's, watch some great tennis, and actually don't think that they care. But what they don't understand is that they, like, without us being a little bit more conscious about our climate and protecting it, that is not actually something that is going to be viably possible in 20, 30, 40 years, because already we've seen huge changes in our weather and outdoor play. Obviously, then that's impacted. We've seen 42 degrees in the UK, which, interestingly enough, Wimbledon worked with the Met Office a few years ago and did like a mock forecast as to, worst case scenario in 2050, I think it said, what a Wimbledon weather forecast could look like. And it happened in 2022. We exceeded the temperatures that the Met Office was saying, worst case scenario, this is what could happen. And so I think it's about trying to get that messaging through to people. Like, you don't have to think you care about, whether you're using a plastic bottle or whether this kitchen is run off of gas. But in order to keep enjoying this, and that goes for the players as well, in order to keep doing this and for this to be your livelihood, you have to care now.
I think people do care, and I think we just need to show that, one of the things I really feel strongly about is that, the solutions are out there. We need to just deploy them more rapidly. We also need to try and show in a positive light the benefits of doing this, which you guys are all about. This is good for us all. Why would you not want, clean, renewable energy generated by the sun or the wind? Don't send a bill. Why would you not want delicious, healthy diets? Why would you not want a healthy, resilient, natural, ecosystem with all of those incredible ecosystem services? And it's just people do care about that. They just probably don't want to be talked to about it in the language that I'm using, like ecosystem services. It's all there and it's all good, and so we just have to show people, the benefits of it.
So I'm conscious that we're coming towards the end, so hopefully I'm going to make this a good last question, but we'll see. One of the things that I think is very fascinating is there's lots of organisations out there who have a huge amount of heritage, have a huge amount of legacy, and transitioning to become a zero carbon business, it requires quite a lot of change, and they're fearful that perhaps that heritage and that legacy is sort of, put slightly out of kilter. Wimbledon is interesting because in order to protect the heritage, you have to protect the environment, and it's forcing that kind of innovation. So I wonder what message you would give to other businesses with that history and heritage that perhaps have a little bit of reticence to change.
I think it is about being true to yourself. I think it's also, people might think it's complicated. I don't think it's complicated because, as we were just saying, it's not complicated to want clean energy, healthy foods, healthy, resilient. It might feel overwhelming, but you can, just as we can make small changes in our own life that add up in your sort of corporate world, you can make small changes that add up. And I'm a bit reluctant to say only do small changes because a huge sort of systemic transformation is required. But I just look back at the things that we've done bit by bit by bit, and so much change has happened that actually it's not as overwhelming or as complicated as you might think. And even just the example of the kitchens, a few years ago it was considered to be, oh my goodness, don't take the gas away from the chefs, they're just really not going to like it. Actually, the chefs are really happy with the new electric induction equipment they've got. So we've shown that it can be done. It genuinely can be done, and the results are going to benefit everybody. So I think bit by bit, you get there.
I think often these phrases like net zero or carbon free or decarbonise, they are thrown around so often, and people become a bit numb to it. And also, people like that doesn't really mean. Obviously, it means something, but it's so not attainable to just say the goal is this. And I think what you guys have done is be like, right, yes, that's the end goal, which is however many years off. But let's start by just decarbonising this kitchen, and let's start by just. We'd love to make this single-use plastic free, but that feels like a huge ask to do the whole thing. Let's start with the straws, then let's move on to the strawberry containers. And I think that's where it becomes a bit more achievable, because you're setting yourself manageable goals, and that relates to everything. It's like saying I want to lose weight. It's not never going to happen. But to say I want to lose 2 pounds, by this date, that's more achievable. Or I really want to exercise more, feels overwhelming. I want to do one exercise class a week, feels a bit more doable. So it's those those achievable goals that I think you've managed to set, that you've meant that you've been slowly but surely, like you say, just chipping away and kind of leading by example, which, like we said, you're so modest, but I think you've got so much to be proud of.
I think also involving people in the organisation as well. So when I arrived, I think one of the things that I've really learnt is, when we arrived, we had a sustainability working group. It's slightly lapsed a bit. And we've reinvigorated that group, and it's really good because we've got people from all across the business now representing sustainability to their teams and then back into the group. And, I'm sure that we're going to get a whole lot more done because of that group as well. And it's also, just because I knew something was happening, it didn't mean that everybody else did. And I think it's really, never stop talking about what's going on. I think I sort of sat back and thought, well, partly in a way a bit sort of the person I am, I suppose. I didn't want to get out there and sort of go on about sustainability all of the time to the teams. But you have to, because first of all, people are interested. And as we said, people care. So they do want to hear from you. And you've just got to keep replaying that message again and again and again.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation that you and I have had before, Hattie, isn't it? Like, there's no such thing as ticking that box. Like, you're not done. There is always more that you need to say. But, we're very aware of time, and we don't have you forever, so we won't say so much more. But we do have a last question that we ask every guest. And so we're going to go ahead and ask you, Hattie, what was the last thing that you did today that was a real, sustainable decision? What was the last decision that you made that was one with the environment in mind?
Work or personal? It could be anything.
Cycling.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
I got to work on my bicycle, and I did. I mean, that's one of the things I'd say to anyone: get a bike. Not only I have some of my best ideas on my bicycle when I'm pedaling into work. I think it's the sort of rush of blood to the head or something. By the time I've got to my desk, I've forgotten what they are. But you're moving, and it's free. And I've since I got my bicycle, I've done over 9,000 kilometres on it, which is that's quite far. And that's just, again, that's bit by bit. That's just steady. So I cycle to the office as much as I possibly can, and I love it. And it means I always know how long the journey is going to take me as well. So I think get on the bike.
Yeah.
I mean, what a perfect note to end on, that you can say on your bike.
Yeah, on
but
your
mean
bike.
it in a polite way.
Oh, so excited. So grateful to have you on. And we are so excited for Wimbledon this year.
Yes, so am I. I mean, the grounds are looking gorgeous. The grass is smelling. Even the compost. Walking into this building, I could smell the compost as well. It's fantastic.
Smells like Pimm's in an English country garden.
Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Green Queens.
If you did and you'd like to hear more, we'd be so very grateful if you could like, subscribe and join the Green group chat for weekly episodes.